This period after lockdown was always going to be a risky one, asking the public to accept changing, and sometimes confusing, COVID-19 rules, while still trying to allow family visits and encouraging people to help support local bars and restaurants. The difference in restrictions in different parts of the country add to the uncertainty. Two couples can jet home on the same flight to Manchester Airport, but while the couple from Chester can go straight to work the next day, the couple from Coldstream have to quarantine in the house for a fortnight. Similarly, a mother with two grown-up daughters in Dumfries and Galloway can all meet up for a coffee in Carlisle, but have to catch up one at a time in Gretna. The changing pattern of outbreaks and second spikes has brought regional lockdowns and demi-lockdowns into force as well. The news from abroad shows the risk is real and that it is in all our interest to make good decisions. It's these sorts of flare-ups which shows the inherent danger in divide and rule politics, which has been an unsavory distraction to those of us more interested in just getting through this time of crisis as best as the country can, rather than playing one part of the UK off against the other. Not long ago, Nicola Sturgeon was using Parliament and her daily televised briefings to claim the prevalence of the virus in Scotland was 5 times lower than it in England. She used that number as the reason to resist being dragged along by another government's decision-making process, which she sniped was shambolic. In short order, we saw wilder elements of the nationalist fringe protesting at the border and shouting abusive and xenophobic slogans at cars crossing from England to Scotland, waving banners to keep Scotland COVID-free and stating England get out of Scotland. Organisers used a 5 times higher statistic to justify their actions, except that 5 times higher number that Nicola Sturgeon repeatedly used was a number of her government's own invention. In fact, the UK's chief statistician slammed the figure, rebuked the First Minister and said the comparison could not and should not have been made. It was bogus. Fast forward a few weeks and Nicola Sturgeon is drawing less attention to comparisons. It could be because, at time of writing, Scotland's number of the virus, the rate of reproduction, is the highest of any part of the UK, or it could be because over 1 million people across Glasgow and surrounding local authority areas face additional restrictions from a local lockdown that takes in nearly 1 in 5 Scots. The situation in Scotland's care homes is so bleak that the Crown Office has been instructed by the Lord Advocate to open an inquiry into care home deaths. Nearly half of all Scotland's COVID fatalities were linked to residential care homes, where hospital patients were transferred without being tested or, in some cases, having received a positive test without the receiving care home being informed. For those who receive care in their own homes, care workers have fired warning shots about the lack of testing. Half of all Scottish home care staff have never been tested for coronavirus, despite working with some of the country's most elderly and vulnerable people. The union Unison has said the lack of testing needs to be dealt with or the Scottish Government risks a new wave of coronavirus deaths, with the number of positive COVID tests having tripled. While the number of Scots in intensive care have doubled over the last fortnight, the spotlight is very much on testing. However, there are red flags being raised about the ability to deliver. Last Monday, just over 6,000 people across Scotland were tested, a drop of more than 10,000 on the week before. Scotland's system for keeping on top of the virus is called Test and Protect. It works by supposedly tracking all positive cases of coronavirus and their contacts, to stop the public from spreading COVID-19 and prevent a second peak. Reports this week show the Test and Protect performance tracking system is missing over 400 positive cases, casting doubt on its effectiveness at all. It is clear that we are headed for a hard and worrying autumn and, if we don't get a grip on the resurgence of this virus, a potentially difficult winter. 2. Politicians and policymakers everywhere are working hard to try and make the right calls at the right time, despite facing a situation that none of us have ever experienced before. We need to keep the country on side as so much of restricting the spread of the virus involves individuals taking responsibility for their own actions. But it shouldn't be too much to ask that leaders spend less time making false comparisons across the UK in order to score political or constitutional points and spend more time sharing information and ideas of best practice to deliver for us all. Nicola Sturgeon has received some plaudits for talking a good game at her lectern every lunchtime, but the real judgment will be on delivery.